Chapter 6, Section 3, Daily Life of the Ancient Greeks. Ask yourself the following questions about your daily life at home and at school. How does the climate of your region affect your daily life? Who does the work in your home to keep things running? Questions to think about as we go through this section. What was life like during the golden age of Greece? And what was the difference between the daily lives of men, women, and slaves in Athens? Key terms that will be defined for you through the Google Classroom: agora, and key place, Athens. Please make sure to have your Google Doc open through the Google Classroom to complete as you go through this video and answer the questions. When you have finished all questions, make sure to submit it through the Google Classroom. The light from the courtyard was still gray when the young boy awoke. The boy sat up on his hard bed and felt the air on his face. He had to get up for school. The boy swallowed his breakfast, pulled his cloak around him, and left the house. Others inside were just beginning to stir. Soon, the household would be starting the day's weaving and other chores. On the way to school, the boy met other students. All were carrying wooden tablets covered with wax. They would write their lessons on the tablets. They talked about their lesson, a long passage of history that they had to memorize. The best part of the day came after school. Then the boys spent the afternoon at the training ground. All the boys exercised and practiced wrestling and throwing a flat plate called a discus. They might watch older athletes training to compete in the Olympic Games, held in honor of Zeus. In the marketplace. On their way to school, the boys passed through the agora of Athens. The Acropolis was the center of Athens' religious life, and the agora was the center of its public life. It was not far from the Acropolis, which rose in splendor above it. All Greek cities had agoras, or public market and meeting places. Athens' agora was probably the busiest and most interesting of them all. In the morning, many Athenian men wandered to the agora. They liked being outdoors. The mild climate of Athens made it possible to carry on business in the open. In the agora, the men talked of politics and philosophy. Sometimes they just gossiped. As they talked, they heard the cries of vendors or sellers of goods and the haggling over prices. Some people came eager to find bargains. The streets were lined with shops. Farmers and artisans also sold their wares from stands set up under shady trees. Just about any food an Athenian would want could be found in the agora. Every day, goods were also for sale: sheep's wool, pottery, hardware, cloth, and books. Temples and government buildings lined the agora. One building was headquarters for Athens' army. Another was a prison. A board displayed public notices such as new laws and upcoming court cases. Life at home. The splendor of public buildings in Athens contrasted with the simplicity of people's houses, even in the Golden Age. Throughout Greece, private homes were plain. Made of mud bricks, they consisted of rooms set around an open courtyard hidden from the street. The courtyard was the center of the household. Other rooms might include a kitchen, storerooms, dining room, and bedrooms. Some homes even had bathrooms, but water had to be carried from a public fountain. Like homes, Greek food was simple. Breakfast might be just bread. For midday meals, the Athenian might add cheese or olives to the bread. Dinner would be a hot meal that was more filling. It might consist of fish and vegetables followed by cheese, fruit, and even cake sweetened with honey. Most Athenians ate very little meat. Even wealthy families only ate meat during religious festivals. Slavery in ancient Greece. It was the job of Greek women to spin thread and weave it into cloth. If these women were wealthy, they owned slaves to help them. Slaves did a great deal of work throughout the city-states of Greece. No one knows for sure, but historians estimate that as many as 100,000 slaves may have lived in Athens. That is almost 1/3 of the population. Today we consider slavery a crime, but almost no one questioned it in ancient times, even in democratic Athens. Many free people became enslaved when they were captured by armies during war or by pirates while traveling on ships. Some slaves were the children of slaves. A large number in Greece were foreigners, because some Greeks were uncomfortable owning other Greeks. Enslaved people did many kinds of work. Some provided labor on farms, others dug silver and other metals in the mines. Still others assisted artisans by making pottery, constructing buildings, or forging weapons and armor. Most Greek households could not run without slaves. They cooked and served food, tended children, and wove cloth. It is hard to make general statements about how enslaved people were treated. Household slaves may have had the easiest life. Often they were treated like members of the family. The slaves who worked in the mines suffered the most. The work was not only physically tiring, but also extremely dangerous. Slaves in the mines did not live long. Women in Athens. If you had walked through the agora, you might have been surprised to see that most of the people were men. If you had asked where the women are, an Athenian man might have replied, "At home." Home was where most Athenian women spent their days. They had almost none of the freedom their husbands, sons, and fathers took for granted. They could not take any part in politics, nor could they vote. They could not own property. About the only official activity allowed them was to be priestesses in religious groups. Running the home and family was the job of women. In some wealthy families, men and women had completely separate quarters. Women organized the spinning and weaving, looked after supplies of food and wine, and cared for young children. They also kept track of the family finances. If a family was wealthy enough to have slaves, they were the woman's responsibility as well. She directed them, trained them, and cared for them when they were sick. Women throughout Greece did important work. No Greek man would have denied it. Yet women were expected to be almost invisible. As Pericles said, "The greatest glory will belong to the woman who is least talked about by men, whether they praise her or find fault with her." This is the end of Chapter 6, Section 3. At this point, you should be able to answer a few questions. First, what place was the center of activity for men during the Golden Age? Second, how did the lives of men, women, and slaves in Athens differ? Finally, what do you think was the most important aspect of life in Athens and why? So not only should you be able to answer those questions, but your Google Doc should be completed at this point, or make sure you complete it when you're done watching this video and submit through the Google Classroom. When you've done that, we'll see you in class tomorrow. And as always, be excellent to one another.